The bowl of soup was still hot when my daughter told me in a firm voice, without blinking, "Dad, you either go to the nursing home or you sleep in the doghouse. You choose." Her words hung in the air, so heavy that not even the clock in the dining room dared to keep ticking. The spoon fell from my hands, and the metallic noise sounded like a gunshot. I sat there freezing, looking at her. Not because I did not believe what she had said, but because in that moment I understood that the little girl I raised with so much love had disappeared a long time ago. In front of me remained only a woman hardened by ambition, a stranger with my blood in her veins. Beside her, Michael, her husband, watched in silence with his arms crossed, and that arrogant smile I never liked. He was the one who pushed her to treat me like this. I knew it, but what he did not know was that I had learned to stay silent, only to listen better. "The nursing home or the doghouse?" she repeated as if speaking to a stranger. "Is that what you think of your father?" I asked calmly. "That is what I think of a man who can no longer fend for himself. We need space, Dad." "Space?" I smiled sadly. "This house has 6 bedrooms. It is not about the size. It is about living together," Michael intervened. "You interfere in everything, William. It is better for you to be in a place where they take care of you." "Take care of me? What a false word coming from a hypocritical mouth." I took a deep breath, grabbed my napkin, and placed it on the table. "I understand. So you accept going to the nursing home?" Emily said impatiently. "No." I stood up slowly with a serenity that seemed to confuse them. I took my old phone out of my pocket and dialed a number I had not used in more than 10 years. "What are you doing?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Making a decision," I replied, and put the phone to my ear. A deep voice answered on the other side. "William, is that you?" "Yes, Robert. The time has come." "Are you sure?" "More than ever." "Good," he said. "I will be there in half an hour." I hung up, put the phone away, and looked at my daughter. "Someone is coming to pick me up." "To pick you up? Who?" "You will see." I sat back down. The silence at the table was thick. Emily did not know whether to feel relieved or restless. Michael, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable. He glanced at the door every now and then as if expecting a surprise he did not quite understand. But before continuing, I would like to know if you subscribe to the channel William's Revenge Stories and if you like the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now let us continue. For half an hour, the ticking of the clock was our only company. Emily avoided looking at me. Michael kept checking his phone. I watched the soup-stained tablecloth, remembering how many times I had cooked for them, how many nights I had stayed up watching over fevers, how many times I had prayed they would lack nothing. "Dad, we are a family," she used to tell me when she was a child. What irony! Now she was kicking me out of the house I built myself, brick by brick, with my worn worker hands, and my back broken in two. The humiliation did not hurt. The erasure did, because being forgotten by a child does not kill you all at once. It extinguishes you little by little, like a candle running out of oxygen. At 7:30 sharp, someone knocked on the door. 3 firm, slow knocks, as if each one announced the end of an era. Michael was the one who got up to open it. When the door opened, the air changed. There he was, Robert Davis, impeccable in a dark suit, hair combed back, face aged but with the same steady gaze I remembered. He had been my partner decades ago when we both dreamed of building a small construction company. I invested everything I had. He took care of the rest. When my wife got sick, I sold my share to pay for her treatments, and he never forgot it. "Good evening," Robert said, walking in with determination. Emily froze. Michael straightened up, trying to hide his nervousness. "May I ask what you're doing here?" my son-in-law asked. "I came to see my friend," Robert replied without even looking at him. Then he looked at me. "Ready, William?" "Ready," I said, standing up. Emily finally reacted. "What is happening, Dad? Where are you going?" "To a place where people remember what the word family means." She frowned. "I do not understand." You do not have to understand, Emily. Just watch and learn. Robert turned to me. Do you want to bring anything? Nothing that comes from this house. Michael laughed mockingly. And where do you plan to go? To live off your friend's charity? Robert looked at him with an unsettling calm. You are mistaken, boy. William is not going to live off my charity. Oh, no? No, he's going to live off what is his. Emily dropped her jaw. His? What are you saying? Robert smiled barely. You will find out later. He offered me his arm, and we walked out together. As we crossed the threshold, I turned around and looked at my daughter. For an instant, I thought I saw something like regret in her eyes, but she hid it immediately. Dad, we are a family. Do not do this, she shouted. I stopped without looking at her. Families take care of each other, Emily. They do not abandon each other. And I closed the door. Robert's car was waiting for us outside, an elegant, silent black SUV. I got in slowly. As we drove down the street, the lights of my house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. I knew you would call me some day, Robert said, lighting a cigarette. Maybe I took too long. No, you did it just in time. I looked out the window. The city was still alive, indifferent, as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had died, and something new was beginning to be born. I knew that tonight did not end with an escape. Tonight, my justice began. The car moved slowly through the city lights. Robert drove without speaking, and I was grateful for that silence. Sometimes words only serve to dirty what the soul already understands. I looked at my reflection in the window, an old man with tired eyes and a heart full of scars. I wondered at what moment my life went wrong. When did my daughter stop seeing me as her father and start seeing me as a burden? Perhaps the answer was in the past, in those years where everything seemed eternal, even love. Emily was only 9 years old when her mother Sarah got sick. The diagnosis was cruel. Advanced cancer. I was working at a construction company that barely let me breathe. I left the house before dawn and returned when she was already asleep. But every penny I earned was for her treatments. I remember one night at the hospital. Sarah took my hand and said with a weak voice, William, if something happens to me, promise me you will not let Emily forget what love is. I promise, I replied, and felt her hand grow cold little by little. I kept that promise with my whole being. I became mother, father, friend, shelter. I did not mind going hungry if she could study. I sold my car, my tools, my wedding watch, everything. When she turned 16, I bought her first dress for the school dance. It was simple, ivory-colored. She cried with emotion and hugged me so tight, I felt my heart would burst. I love you, Dad, she told me then, and I believed that nothing and no one could break that bond. But life, like cement that cracks over time, began to show its fissures. The first change came when she met Michael, a well-dressed boy, confident smile, calculating eyes. From the first time I saw him, I knew he did not have good intentions. Too sure of himself, too charming, and with a hunger that was not satisfied with affection. He is a good man, Dad, Emily told me, excited. And what does he do for a living? He is starting a business. He just needs a little push. And you think I am that push? I'm not saying it for that, but if you could help him, it would be a gesture of trust. Help him. That word chased me for years. Helping him meant giving him my money, my contacts, my time. Little by little, my house filled with his presence, and my life began to empty out. Michael started deciding what we bought, how we spent money, even what time I could use the television. When I complained, Emily told me, Dad, do not exaggerate. He is only trying to help you. Help me do what? Forget who I am? That was the beginning of the end. Years passed, and my place in my own house became smaller and smaller. First, it was my room. Dad, let's remodel it to rent it out and have extra income. Then my favorite armchair. Dad, that piece of furniture is old. Let's throw it away. And finally, my opinion. Dad, stop meddling in our decisions. I did not realize that the more I stayed silent, the more I disappeared. Until one day I overheard a conversation that broke my soul. "We cannot go on like this," Michael was saying. "Your father slows everything down." "He is my father," Emily replied with a tired tone. "A father who does not work, who takes up space, who costs money." "Do not say that. Then decide, either him or our life." I leaned against the wall, feeling the world slip through my hands. My daughter did not answer, and that silence was the cruelest sentence. The day she gave me the ultimatum, the nursing home or the doghouse, it did not surprise me. I had felt it coming. I just needed to see it to understand that nothing remained of the love that had raised her. But what she did not know was that sometimes a father's silence is not weakness. It is strategy. Robert always told me, "The man who stays silent when humiliated is not defeated. He is watching how the others sink." And I had watched enough. We arrived at his house that night. It was a modern mansion, spacious, one of those that smell of marble and power. When I entered, his wife, Linda, welcomed me with a warm smile. "William, finally. Robert has told us so much about you." "Thank you, dear. I apologize for coming at this hour." "Please, this is your house." That phrase, "this is your house," shook me. It had been years since anyone said it to me without hidden intent or sarcasm. We ate dinner in silence. Linda served me soup and hot bread. When I finished, Robert looked at me and said, "You stay here as long as you want, but tomorrow we will talk about something more important." "What is it about?" I asked. "About justice?" That word echoed in my chest. Justice. Not revenge. Not resentment. Justice. That night I slept in a large room with clean sheets and the smell of lavender. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in many years, I did not dream of screams or closed doors. I dreamed of Sarah, my wife, smiling in a field of sunflowers. She told me with her sweet voice, "It is time, William, not to punish, but to teach." I woke up with tears in my eyes, and I knew that the plan that had started with a phone call was going to change everything. Because love can break, yes, but when a father decides to stand up, the world trembles. Dawn found me sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in my hands and a mind full of memories. The sun filtered through the curtains, dyeing the room in golden tones. I had slept little, but not out of sadness. For the first time in years, my head had clarity. I heard Robert's steps approaching. He was always a punctual man, one of those who believe that time is not wasted, it is respected. He entered without making noise, with a dossier under his arm. "Good morning, old friend," he said to me. "Good morning, Robert. Ready to tell me what you left in the air last night?" "Ready," he replied, sitting across from me. He opened the dossier and placed it on the table. Inside were yellowed papers, notarized documents, old photos, and a contract I recognized immediately. "Do you remember this?" he asked. "Of course I do. It is the contract of the company we founded together." "Exactly. The day you sold your share to pay for Sarah's treatment, I promised myself that one day I would return what belonged to you." I looked at him with surprise. "But I told you it was not necessary. I did it for friendship. And for love," he added with a grave expression. "But love is not paid with words, William. It is honored with acts." He took out another document and slid it toward me. "For 20 years, everything we earned with the company was divided in two. Half is in your name." "What are you saying? I never closed the partnership? Legally, you are still a co-owner." I felt my heart skip a beat. "That is impossible." "I signed the sale." "Yes, but you signed a symbolic agreement. I never registered it." I remained silent, not knowing what to say. For years I had lived modestly, without imagining that on paper I was the owner of half a construction company that was now worth millions. Robert leaned toward me. "Your daughter and her husband think they defeated you, but real power lies not in the money they stole with lies, but in what you can decide now." I took a deep breath. "And what do you propose?" Robert lit a cigarette. "Justice, but not the kind that destroys, the kind that teaches. Speak clearly. We are going to let them sink themselves. How? We will give them exactly what they always wanted: money, power, and opportunities. And we will see what they do with that. I looked at him, intrigued. What do you have in mind? First, you will make peace with them. You will tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that you accept leaving, but that you want to leave them something for their future. And what will I leave them? A fake document, a will that says that in case of your death, they inherit your shares in my company. I laughed with disbelief. And what will that achieve? That they reveal who they really are? Greed always cracks the mask. Robert was right. I knew Michael well. He would not resist the temptation to take advantage of something he believed was his. And what will you gain from this? I asked suspiciously. Peace of mind. I am tired of seeing good people suffer in silence. It is time someone put things in their place. That morning we had breakfast together. His wife, Linda, listened in silence with that serenity that only wise women have. When Robert told her the plan, she nodded slowly. William, she told me, sometimes the lessons that hurt the most are the only ones that leave a mark. I do not want to hurt them, Linda. I just want them to understand. And they will, she said, but in their own way. We finished breakfast in silence. The air felt dense, as if the universe were waiting for the next move. At noon, Robert took me to his office. It was an imposing building in the center of the city. The walls were covered with awards, photographs with politicians and businessmen, and a large golden plaque with his name. At the entrance, the employees greeted him with respect, but what impressed me most was what I saw on the back wall. A portrait of me, younger, framed next to his. I always kept it there, he said, noticing my surprise. Why? Because everything I am started with you. I felt a lump in my throat. So many times I had felt useless, old, forgotten, and without knowing it, I was still part of something much bigger. Robert handed me a folder. Here are the documents we will use. Do not worry, everything is prepared. And what should I do now? Go back home? Home? I asked, bewildered. Yes, to the house they kicked you out of. His look turned serious. It is time they learn what it means to face the gaze of a man who has no fear. That night when I arrived, the house was in semi-darkness. Emily opened the door with a surprised expression. Dad? What are you doing here? I forgot something, I replied calmly. What thing? My dignity. She stepped back, confused. Michael appeared behind her, visibly annoyed. I thought you were going to the nursing home. I changed my mind, I said, taking out the envelope Robert had given me. And what is that? Emily asked. My will. The silence was immediate. I could feel their breathing quicken. Michael took a step forward. Will? Yes. I decided to leave everything in order before leaving. Emily blinked, trying to maintain composure. It was not necessary, Dad. Of course it was, I replied with a slight smile. You never know who might end up with what when one dies. I left the envelope on the table and looked at them. Tomorrow I will come with the notary to sign. I turned around and left, before they said anything else. I closed the door slowly, and as I walked down the steps, I knew the game had begun. That night, from the car window, I watched the illuminated house. I saw shadows moving inside. I knew they could not wait until tomorrow to open the envelope, and that anxiety would be the beginning of their fall. Because the worst trap is not the one laid with hate, it is the one built with truth. The next morning I woke up before dawn. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh coffee. Robert was already up, reviewing some papers in his dining room. He wore that calm look that always hid something calculated behind it. Did you sleep well, William? He asked me. Too well. I haven't rested like this in years. Perfect, he said, pouring himself a cup. Because today the real test begins. He handed me a sealed envelope. What is this? An exact copy of the fake will you left at the house last night. They will not open it without investigating first, you will see. And what will they do? What every thief does before stealing. Make sure the victim is not watching. I smiled. I knew exactly what he meant. Meanwhile, in my old house, the atmosphere must have been a contained storm. I can imagine Emily nervously pacing from one side to the other, with the envelope in her hands. Michael, on the other hand, colder, more calculating. "It makes no sense to wait for the notary," he surely told her. "We need to know what it says now. But Michael, if my father finds out, your father is a senile old man. If he really has something in his name, that paper is our chance." Years of marriage to him had turned my daughter into his reflection, a woman who no longer knew the difference between love and convenience. According to what Robert told me later, by 9 in the morning they had already called his office. "Who are they?" his secretary asked. "Emily and Michael Morales," they replied, and he, without hesitating, said, "Tell them I will receive them at 11. I watched everything from afar, parked across the square with the car windows halfway down. Robert entered his building, escorted by 2 employees. He wore a gray suit, and that expression that mixed power and courtesy, the kind of presence that commands respect even before speaking. 2 hours later, I knew they were already on their way. Emily wore an elegant dress, the same one she used to wear for society events, although her face betrayed a sleepless night. Michael, on the other hand, walked with his chest puffed out and eyes shining with greed. When they entered Robert's office, he stood up and greeted them as if he knew nothing. "Good morning. How can I help you?" he asked with measured kindness. Michael cleared his throat. "We come on behalf of my father-in-law, Mr. William Morales." "Ah, yes," Robert replied with a barely perceptible smile. "He did not tell me he would send representatives." "Well, you know he is old," Michael added, making a fake pause. "But we wanted to confirm some details about his partnership." Robert observed him without saying anything, enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Then calmly he took his pen and wrote something on a paper. "Partnership? What are you talking about? My father-in-law was your partner, was he not? Many years ago, perhaps." "Why do you ask?" Emily intervened with a nervous smile. "Last night he left us a document, a will. It says he still owns shares in your company." "And what about it?" "Well," she hesitated, "we wanted to make sure it was real." Robert leaned forward. "And if it were?" Michael smiled with that arrogance I always knew. "Then it would be logical to assume that those shares would pass into the hands of his daughter, right?" Robert nodded slowly. "Logical, yes, but not fair." The comment threw them off. Emily looked at him without understanding. "Excuse me?" "You see, young lady," he said with a deep voice, "your father was not just my partner. He was the one who saved this company. I was ruined, and he sold everything he had to help me." "I already know that," she interrupted uncomfortably. "No, you do not know it," Robert replied sharply, "because if you knew, you would never have let a man like Michael disrespect him in his own house." Emily looked down. Michael tried to regain control. "We did not come here to listen to sermons, Mr. Davis. I know. You came looking for an inheritance." The silence became thick. Robert stood up slowly and walked to the window. "Look, young people, my company is not a game, and if you had a little common sense, you would understand that money not earned with effort turns into poison." Michael clenched his fists. "Are you threatening us?" "No," Robert replied, turning toward them. "I am warning you." At 11:30 they left the office with wounded pride and curiosity even more awakened. Robert had treated them with courtesy but had dropped enough phrases to keep them on edge. "Just what we needed," Robert told me when he called later. His voice sounded amused. "Are they worse than I imagined?" "Much more. That man, Michael, does not hide his greed. And your daughter?" He paused. "Your daughter is afraid." "Of what?" "Of losing something she never had. That afternoon I passed in front of my old house again. The curtains were drawn and the lights on. From outside I heard arguments. My daughter was screaming. Michael hit something. I could not hear the words, but I did not need to. I knew that money, even imaginary money, had begun to divide them. I smiled to myself, not because I enjoyed their conflict, but because I knew that crack would be the door through which the truth would enter. At dusk, Robert called me again. "Everything is ready, William. Tomorrow we will invite them to dinner." "Here?" "Yes. I want them to hear from my own mouth what you really own." "And what do I own, Robert?" I asked, although I knew the answer. "The river. More than you imagine, old friend." "So what is the plan?" "Let the truth fall on them like a mirror, and see if they have the courage to look at themselves." We hung up. I stayed looking at the sky. The night was clear, the stars were shining, and the air had that silence that precedes great changes. I knew that starting tomorrow, nothing would be the same, neither for them nor for me. The next night, Robert organized the dinner. His house, elegant but sober, was lit with warm lamps that gave the atmosphere a solemn, almost theatrical air. I arrived early. Martha, the housekeeper, was finishing setting the silverware. Everything had to be perfect, because this dinner was not a family gathering. It was a trap wrapped in good manners. Robert, impeccable as always, was reviewing the final details. "Are you sure you are ready for this, William?" he asked me. "More than ready," I replied. "I'm only worried about seeing her." "Emily?" I nodded. "I do not hate her, Robert. That would be easy. What I feel is more complex. Disappointment, pity, and a small hope that something still remains of the daughter I raised." Robert smiled. "Then tonight, we will know if that hope is worth it." At 8 o'clock sharp, a car parked in front of the house. From the window I saw them get out. Emily in a simple black dress, face made up with discretion. Michael in a dark suit, fake smile and the same ambitious glint in his eyes. Martha opened the door and led them to the living room. "Good evening," Emily said, looking around. "What a beautiful house." "Thank you," Robert replied, shaking her hand. "I'm glad you came." Then he turned to me. "I suppose you did not expect to see him so soon, right?" The silence became uncomfortable. Emily swallowed hard. Michael feigned courtesy. "Good evening, William." "Good evening, Michael." We shook hands. His was cold. We sat down. The dinner began with light conversation, but the tension could be cut with a knife. No one dared to speak of the real reason for that meeting until Robert broke the silence. "Emily," he said with a serene voice, "your father asked me to invite you to clarify some things." "Clarify?" she asked, feigning surprise. "Yes, about his participation in my company." Michael's eyes lit up. "Ah, yes, that topic." He tried to sound casual. "We thought all that no longer existed." Robert smiled barely. "Ah, but it does exist." His tone changed. The kindness became surgical precision. He took out a leather folder and placed it on the table. "Here are the original documents of the partnership we founded more than 30 years ago." Emily looked at him with wide eyes. "So it is true?" "More than true. Your father remains a co-owner." Michael could not hide his smile. "That is excellent news, Mr. Davis. I'm glad to know everything is in order." Robert stared at him. "In order?" "I do not think so." "Why do you say that?" "Because order breaks when gratitude disappears." Silence. Emily looked down. Michael tried to maintain his composure. "I do not understand what you are referring to." "I am referring," Robert said with a firm voice, "to the fact that money can rebuild a house, but not a conscience." Emily took a deep breath. "Mr. Davis, with all due respect, I do not think it is fair to speak like that. You do not know what we have been through." "You are right, daughter," I intervened softly. "I do not know what you have been through, but I do know what I went through." I looked her directly in the eyes. "I raised you with my hands. I sold my tools to pay for your school. I deprived myself of food so you would have books. And one day when I asked you for a little space to grow old in peace, you gave me two options, the nursing home or the doghouse." Emily closed her eyes as if my words hit her physically. Michael put a hand on hers, but she pushed it away. "Dad," she whispered, "Do not speak yet." I took a breath. "I did not bring you here to humiliate you. I brought you so you can see who became the mirror of your ambition." Robert got up and went to a side cabinet. He placed a wooden box on the table. Inside were old photographs, my wedding with Sarah, Emily's birthdays, the first blueprints of the company, all mixed with notary papers and newspaper clippings. "Look," he said, opening a photo. "This man, your father, was the one who gave me the chance to rise when I had nothing." "It makes no sense to dig up the past," Michael replied uncomfortably. "Yes, it does," Robert said, raising his voice. "When the past serves to remember who deserves respect." Emily stood up trembling. "Dad, I knew nothing about this." "You did not want to know, daughter. Love made you uncomfortable when it did not serve to show off." The silence that followed was heavy. Martha brought dessert, but no one touched it. Robert, serene, looked at Michael. "I know what you were planning." Michael turned pale. "What are you saying?" "You thought my company would pass to you, right? That Williams will guaranteed you a fortune." Emily looked at him terrified. "How do you know?" "Let's say I have good ears and better friends," he said, looking at me. I nodded slowly. "The document I left at the house was a test." "A test?" Michael repeated. "Yes. I wanted to know if there was still any love left in you, or if you only saw numbers." Michael stood up furious. "This is a trap." "No," I replied calmly. "This is life returning the reflection of your actions." Emily began to cry silently. Her tears hurt me more than her words that night. She covered her face, murmuring, "Forgive me, Dad. I did not know what I was doing." "Yes, you knew, daughter," I said with sadness. "But now I understand that guilt can also be a form of learning." Robert approached and put a hand on my shoulder. "The truth has been told, William." I nodded. "Yes, but it is not over." I looked at both of them. "Tomorrow I want you to come back to my house. There is something else I must show you." Emily looked up confused. "What thing?" "The true inheritance," I replied. Michael tried to reply, but Robert stopped him with a gesture. "It is in your interest to listen," he told him with a firm voice. "Sometimes the greatest fortune does not come in bills, but in lessons that mark the skin." They left the house without saying a word. I watched them leave from the window. Emily walked a few steps behind her husband with her shoulders slumped. Michael, on the other hand, remained upright, with the contained fury of one who does not accept losing. Robert looked at me and said, "Now begins the second part, William." "And what is it?" "The hardest one, letting remorse do its work." I nodded. I knew he was right. Sometimes punishment needs no screams, nor revenge, nor courts, only a clean mirror and the silence of conscience. The dawn of the next day brought with it a deceptive calm. From the window of the room Robert had prepared for me, I observed the garden covered in dew. The breeze was fresh, and yet I felt the air dense, loaded with premonitions. I knew that tonight would be decisive, not only because the truth would come to light, but because it would test what was left of my daughter's soul. Robert entered the room without knocking, as he did when we worked together decades ago. "Ready to close the circle, old friend?" he asked with a tired smile. "Ready," I replied, "but I will not deny that I am afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of seeing that there is nothing good left in her." Robert left the coffee cup on the table. "Sometimes to clean a wound, you have to open it." During the day, the preparations were made with almost military precision. Robert invited several partners of the company, the notary he had kept since the 80s, and even a couple of local journalists to document the tribute. No one knew the real reason for that dinner except us two. Martha, the housekeeper, was the one who helped me get dressed. While adjusting the knot of my tie, she told me, "You have a noble heart, Mr. William, but remember that the strongest blows are not given by hatred, but by disappointment." "I know, dear, and even so, I need everything to be known." At 8 o'clock sharp, the guests began to arrive. The main hall of Robert's house looked like a movie set. Soft lights, gleaming glasses, the elegant murmur of conversations. I stood by the large window, trying to stay calm. Then I saw them enter. Emily in a dark red dress, hair gathered with care. Michael, impeccable, with the triumphant air of one who believes victory is assured. They approached to greet me. "Dad," she said with a rehearsed smile, "thanks for inviting us." "You're welcome, daughter. I want tonight to be unforgettable." We sat down. The wine began to flow, laughter mixing with expectations, but beneath the surface, everyone could feel something brewing. It was then that Robert stood up. He tapped the glass gently with a spoon, asking for attention. "Dear friends, colleagues," he began with a firm voice, "today we are not here just to have dinner. We are here to celebrate a moral debt that has been waiting more than 30 years to be paid." The murmurs died down. Emily and Michael looked at each other, intrigued. Robert continued, "Many of you know that decades ago I started this company with a partner, a man who saved me when everything was lost." He paused. "That man is here, sitting among us." Everyone directed their gaze toward me. I remained silent. "Yes, gentlemen," Robert continued, "I refer to William Morales." The audience applauded, and I felt an unexpected warmth in my chest. Robert kept speaking. William never demanded anything, but I, as a man of my word, could not die peacefully knowing that he still appeared as a partner in the documents, without having received what corresponded to him. Emily squeezed the napkin between her fingers. Michael tilted his head, trying to process what he was hearing. "That is why," Robert said, raising a folder, "I have decided to officially transfer half of my shares of the company to the name of William Morales." The murmur transformed into surprise, and applause filled the room. Emily turned pale. Michael, on the other hand, could barely hide the greed in his eyes. I watched their faces, and I knew the game had just changed. During dinner, guests approached to congratulate me. Some remembered old construction jobs. Others thanked me for my exemplary humility. I nodded, smiled, but my thoughts were on Emily. I watched her in silence, pretending to smile, while Michael talked to Robert, trying to extract details. When the last dish was served, Robert announced, "I want to make a toast." Everyone raised their glasses. I toast to men who do not forget, to friends who teach that wealth is not measured in figures, but in loyalty. I raised mine. "And for children," I said then, "who still have time to remember that love is not bought nor inherited." The applause was timid. Emily lowered her head. Michael remained rigid, but his look was pure, contained fury. When dinner ended, the guests began to leave. Robert approached me and whispered, "The seed is already planted. And what will come next? You will see the harvest very soon." And he was not wrong. That same night, while saying goodbye to the last attendees, Emily approached me. Her eyes shone, but not with emotion. It was pure anxiety. "Dad," she said in a low voice, "I did not know you were so important to Mr. Davis." "Money does not make me important, daughter. What matters is what one does with it." "I know," she stammered, "but Michael and I were worried about you." "Worried?" I repeated with irony. "Yes, of course. We did not want you to feel alone." "What a sudden detail," I replied. "But do not worry. I already learned to live accompanied by my conscience." She took my arm. "Dad, we could start over. I know I have been tough, but—" "Emily," I interrupted her, "if your words come from love, they are enough for me. But if they come from interest, save them." She stood motionless with trembling lips. Michael, from afar, watched us with suspicion. When I left, Robert walked with me to the car. "Did you see her?" he asked. "Yes." "She is scared, confused, and tempted. So the plan is working." "Yes, but it hurts," I admitted. "All important lessons hurt, William." I leaned on my cane and looked at the starry sky. "And if she does not learn Robert, then you will know you did everything possible, and that, old friend, is already enough." I got in the car and left. Through the rearview mirror, I saw my daughter's silhouette in the door, watching me drive away, and I knew that something inside her had begun to break. Maybe pride, maybe her heart, or maybe, just maybe, her conscience. Barely 3 days passed since that dinner when I received the first call. It was Emily. Her voice trembling, she tried to sound casual. "Dad, I wanted to know how you are." "Fine, daughter, and you?" "Fine, too. It is just, I cannot stop thinking about last night." It was a long night, yes. There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that is filled with fake words. I would like to see you, Dad. Michael and I want to invite you to lunch. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. Money is a powerful magnet, and greed does not take long to disguise itself as affection when the opportunity appears. Even so, I accepted. All right, daughter. Tell me where and what time. When I hung up, Robert, who was sitting across from me reviewing some blueprints, looked up. They already started. Yes. I told you, he said with a half-smile. Now you will see how far their theater goes. Do not underestimate me, Robert, I replied calmly. I invented that theater when I pretended to be okay so my daughter would not see me cry. The restaurant they chose was one of those places that try to look luxurious, but hide vulgarity behind modern decoration. They arrived 20 minutes late. Emily hugged me with an exaggeration that bordered on comical. Dad, what a joy to see you. The joy is mine, daughter. Michael shook my hand. William, he said with a forced smile. I'm glad we can talk like family. I hope so, boy, I replied with studied calm. We sat down. They ordered wine, salad, steak. I barely tasted a bite. I preferred to observe. Emily talked about trivial things. The weather, traffic, plans to redecorate the house. But every now and then she let slip phrases that betrayed her true intention. Dad, I imagine you will have many commitments with the company now. Some, yes. It must be exhausting to handle so much money at your age, she added with a crooked smile. Michael intervened immediately. Yes, big decisions require help. People you trust, for example. I took a second before answering. People I trust? Yes, Michael repeated, leaning toward me. Us, for example. There it was. The disguise began to tear. I see, I said with serenity. And what kind of help do you offer? Emily squeezed her glass. Dad, do not take it like that. We just want to accompany you. You are not alone. No, daughter, I replied. I am more accompanied than you imagine. Silence. Robert was right. Ambition always betrays itself. After lunch, they insisted on accompanying me home. I accepted. I knew they wanted to see where I lived now, how much I had, what they could calculate. When we arrived at Robert's residence, they were speechless. You live here? Emily asked, amazed. For now, I replied, entering with a firm step. It is huge, Michael said, looking at the paintings. A place worthy of someone important. Martha received them with kindness. She offered them coffee. While she prepared it, I watched them with distance. Every gesture, every word, every smile was a strategy. Emily touched the furniture. Michael analyzed the details. They were not looking for conversation. They were looking to estimate the value of what they could lose if they did not play their cards right. Dad, she said finally, have you thought about what you will do with the company? No, I am evaluating options. Maybe you could transfer part of your shares to someone trustworthy, someone in the family. Interesting idea, I replied without looking at her. I will think about it. Michael felt satisfied. They thought they had advanced a step. But what they did not know was that Robert, from his office, listened to every word through the security camera system. When they left, Robert entered the living room. His expression was a mix of disappointment and serenity. They did not take 5 minutes to show their teeth, he said. Yes. But they still do not know they are biting a shadow. Do you plan to continue the game? Until the end. I want them to be the ones who pronounce the sentence. Robert smiled. Then it is time for the second phase. Which one? The donation. What donation? I asked, intrigued. Tomorrow you will publicly announce that you will donate part of your shares to a foundation for social works. And what will that achieve? Desperation. When greedy people feel they are losing, they become dangerous, and they reveal everything. That night, I could not sleep. I looked at an old photo of Emily as a child. She was 6 years old and sitting on my shoulders, laughing while the rain soaked us in the park. I remembered her small voice telling me, Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you like you take care of me. I closed my eyes. The pain did not come from the betrayal, but from the memory of that broken promise. The next morning, we made the announcement. Robert organized a press conference at the company headquarters. Journalists, cameras, photographers, everyone was there. He handed me a prepared speech, but I preferred to speak from the heart. For years I lived believing I had lost everything, I said into the microphones. But I discovered that true wealth is not measured by what one keeps, but by what one can return to the world. Is it true that you will donate your shares, Mr. Morales? A journalist asked. Yes. I will transfer them to a foundation that will bear the name of my late wife, Sarah, to help young people without resources study engineering. Applause filled the room. In the front row, Emily and Michael, with petrified faces, tried to smile for the cameras. I observed them from the podium without resentment, but with brutal clarity. I knew that smile of theirs was not pride. It was fear. When it all ended, Robert took my arm and whispered, "It is done." "Yes," I replied, looking at my daughter in the crowd. "Now it only remains to see how far they are willing to go." That night when I returned home, my phone vibrated. A new message from Emily. It said, "Dad, we have to talk. It is important." I smiled with sadness. The game continued. And this time, they themselves were going to dig their own moral grave. Emily's message arrived at 11 at night. I could not sleep after reading it. "Dad, we have to talk. It is important." No more words. No tone to indicate if it was concern or strategy. Just that phrase that, coming from her, could mean anything. At dawn, I told Robert. "I knew they would do it," he said while pouring himself coffee. "Money slips through their fingers and desperation does not take long to bite." "What do I do?" "Receive them, but not alone. Do you want to be present?" "No. This time it will be your scene. I will only watch from afar." And so it was. Emily arrived mid-afternoon. Michael came behind with that air of someone entering territory that does not belong to him but acting as if it were his. Martha received them with courtesy, although her eyes pierced through them. "Come in. William is waiting for you in the living room." I saw them enter, and I knew they brought a rehearsed script. Emily walked slowly, as if wanting to measure my reactions. Michael followed her with a folder under his arm, feigning serenity. "Dad," she began. "Thanks for seeing us." "I always receive my family daughter," I replied without getting up from the armchair. "We came to talk about the foundation," Michael added with his honeyed tone. "It seems like a noble project to us, but we believe you might need help handling all that." "Help?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Of course. It is a lot of money, a lot of responsibility. You would not want something to go wrong." Emily nodded. "Dad, we do not want anyone to take advantage of you. We could help you manage the funds, so everything is transparent." "Transparent?" The irony almost made me laugh. "I understand," I said. "And what exactly do you propose?" Michael opened the folder. "We have drafted a joint management document. You would keep the honorary direction, but we would take care of the daily handling." I watched him without interrupting. The paper had my name printed in large letters. It was a contract disguised as nobility. As soon as I signed it, all the foundation's money would pass into their hands. "I see you have worked hard," I said, clasping my hands. "We want to do it for you," Emily replied. "For Mom." "For Mom." Using Sarah's name was the lowest blow. I felt a knot in my chest. "For Mom?" I repeated slowly. "Yes," she said, almost crying. "You always wanted her memory to stay alive, and now you want to be her moral heirs. What a generous gesture." Michael noticed the tone and frowned. "Is there a problem, William?" "None. I was just wondering if you really think I do not know how to read between the lines." Emily looked at me confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you just tried to steal from an old man the only thing he has left, his dignity." Silence fell like a dry blow. Emily was trembling. Michael tried to maintain control. "It is not what you think, William." "Then explain it to me." "We wanted to help, just that." "Help? With legal clauses, hidden signatures, and commissions?" Their faces broke down. Michael gritted his teeth. We were not going to hurt you. You already did, the day you called me a burden, the day my daughter kicked me out of my house. Emily broke down crying. Dad, I was confused. No, daughter, I said, standing up. You were blind, but not from love, from ambition. She covered her face with her hands. Michael tried to approach, but I took a step back. Do you know what is saddest, Michael? That you thought your intelligence would be enough to hide your greed. But greed cannot be disguised. It smells. You have no proof, he spat. I do not need proof, I replied calmly. I have memory. Then a slight click sounded. Robert entered the room slowly, holding his phone. Oh, proofs are not missing, he said with an icy smile. Michael turned pale. What does this mean? It means, Robert said, that I just recorded the entire conversation. He held up the device. Every word, every lie. Emily turned to me terrified. Dad, please, do not do this. Do this? Tell the truth? I asked. You do not understand, she said, sobbing. If this comes out, we will lose everything. Everything that was not yours, Robert clarified. Michael tried to regain control. We can negotiate, he said nervously. We delete the recording. We make a deal. There are no more deals, I cut him off. You miserable old man, he shouted and took a step toward me. Robert stopped him with a cold stare. I advise you not to try it. Emily fell to her knees. Dad, please, she said through tears. Do not leave me like this. Like what daughter? I asked, looking at her with broken tenderness. Without money or without a soul? She did not answer. Her crying filled the room. For a moment the silence hurt me more than any insult, but I had gone too far to turn back. Leave, I said finally. I do not want to see you again until you understand the value of a given word. Michael grabbed her arm and pulled her up roughly. Let's go. Before leaving, he turned to me. You will regret this. Maybe, I replied, but at least I will do it with a clean conscience. When they left, I let myself fall into the armchair. The weight of the years fell on me all at once. Robert approached and put a hand on my shoulder. You did well. I do not feel well, I admitted, because you still love her. Yes, I whispered, but sometimes loving also means keeping a distance. We stayed in silence. Outside, the wind shook the trees. For an instant, I thought I heard Sarah's voice in my memory, whispering, It is done, William. Now they can learn, even if it is late. I closed my eyes. There was no triumph, nor glory, nor revenge, only a sad calm, and the certainty that justice, although it hurts, also liberates. The silence after the storm is usually crueler than the noise itself. The house stood still, as if even the walls were afraid to break the calm. Robert had gone to his office. I remained alone with my cane leaning against the table and a heavy heart, more than tired. I had won, yes, but I did not feel victory. I felt emptiness. Justice does not always bring comfort. Sometimes it only leaves a bitter echo that reminds you how much you had to lose to reach it. That night, I did not eat dinner. I just poured myself a drink and sat in front of the large window. The rain began to fall slowly, as if the sky also wanted to cry with me. I remembered the days when Emily was a little girl, how she ran through the yard with her mother behind her, laughing, hands stained with paint. I remembered how she hugged me on cold nights, promising she would never leave me alone. And I thought, maybe promises are not broken. Time simply takes them away when the heart hardens. 2 days passed without news. Until the third day, Martha entered the living room with an envelope in her hand. Mr. William, someone came to leave this. Who? A young woman, your daughter. My chest tightened. I took the envelope. It had my name written in her trembling handwriting. Inside was a letter and a key. Dad, I do not know if I have the right to write to you after everything I did. Michael left. He left me in the middle of our debts. With the house mortgaged and my pride destroyed, I have nothing. I only have memories and guilt left. The key is to your old house. It does not belong to me anymore. I went to the bank and signed the waiver. I do not want anything I have not earned with my hands. I know words are not enough, but if one day you decide to listen to me, I will be at the place where you used to take me as a child, Poplar Park. Forgive me, even if I do not deserve it. Your daughter, Emily. I read the letter 3 times. The ink was runny in some sections. Tears, maybe, or rain. It did not matter. What mattered was that for the first time in years, I felt I was speaking to the real Emily, not to the woman Michael molded to his whim. That afternoon, I asked Robert to take me to the park. He said nothing, just nodded and prepared the car. The sky remained gray, but the air smelled clean. When we arrived, the park was almost empty. The poplars swayed gently with the wind, and there, on the bench where we used to sit, was her, Emily, dressed in a worn coat, hair loose, eyes swollen. She saw me approaching and stood up, but did not dare to move. I advanced with a slow step, leaning on my cane. When I was in front of her, I only said, "Sit down, daughter." She obeyed in silence. We stayed like that without speaking, listening to the leaves fall. "Why did you come?" I asked finally. "Because I have no one else." "Yes, you do, Emily. You have yourself, and that is worth more than you imagine. I do not know if I can be who I was again." "No one can," I replied, "but one can start from another place." She cried without hiding. I let her cry. I said nothing. Sometimes forgiveness begins with silence. When she calmed down, she showed me a small notebook. "I wrote something," she said, trembling, "about you, about Mom, about what I learned. Can I read it?" "No, not yet. I want to finish it first. I want it to make sense." I nodded, and in that moment I saw my daughter as I hadn't seen her in years. Human, not perfect, not strong, but fragile and aware of her fragility, and I knew that something inside me was opening again. "Where are you living?" I asked. "In a small room near the market. I work in a store." "Do you need help?" "I do not want money, Dad." "I'm not talking about money," I replied. "I'm talking about company." She looked at me with eyes full of guilt. "Can you still love me after everything?" I never stopped doing it. Her hands sought mine. They were the same hands that one day pushed me away, and now they trembled, asking for shelter. And I, without thinking, took them. Not because I forgot, but because I understood. The sun began to set. Robert, in the distance, watched from the car. Emily leaned on my shoulder like when she was a child. "Do you think Mom would forgive me?" she whispered. "Your mother had an immense heart. But forgiveness does not come from the dead daughter. It comes from what we do after recognizing we failed." She nodded, and then with a voice almost broken, she said, "I want to start over, Dad." "Then start. Can I see you again?" "Whenever you want." I returned that night with a different heart, not lighter, but more alive. Robert listened to me in silence while I told him everything. When I finished, he said, "And did you forgive her?" "I do not know, Robert." "What do you mean you do not know?" "I think forgiveness is not a door that opens suddenly. It is a path, and today I barely took the first step." Before sleeping, I read her letter again. I kept it in the drawer next to a photo of Sarah. "You did well, my love," I murmured to the portrait. I taught her with toughness, but with love. I turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, I did not dream of pain or betrayal. I dreamed of a bench under the poplars, with a daughter crying and a father who, despite everything, still believed in her. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying the one who hurt you, but forcing them to look in the mirror and learn to be better. Dawn came with a different silence, of those silences that do not hurt but announce something new. The sun filtered through the curtains of my room, and the smell of fresh coffee reminded me that I was still alive, that life went on, and that somehow it made sense again. I sat slowly on the edge of the bed. My body felt heavy, but my soul was calm. I thought of Sarah, of how she used to wake me up with the phrase I miss most in the world. William, do not get used to pain. You were not made to suffer, but to teach. Maybe that is why I was still here. Not to settle scores, but to leave a lesson that would survive my mistakes and those of the ones I loved. After what happened with Emily, Robert insisted I take a break. You need clean air, far from everything, he told me one morning while reviewing papers in his office. And do you think one can get away from the past just by breathing differently? I replied, half joking. No, but you can learn to live with it without it drowning you. He was right. That is why I accepted his proposal to spend a few days at the country house, the one I hadn't visited in years. Before leaving, I decided to write a letter to my daughter. Not a letter of reproaches, but one of emotional testament. Because money can divide, but words, if they are honest, can heal. Dear Emily, I do not know if these lines find you well. I do not write to judge you, but to explain what time taught me. When your mother died, I thought my purpose was to protect you from pain. But by doing so, I have also protected you from the truth. That love without limits sometimes destroys what it tries to save. I gave you everything, daughter, and in that everything I forgot to leave you space to make mistakes without fear. I do not blame you for getting lost. We all do sometime. The important thing is not how much we fall, but if we are capable of looking up. If you ever doubt who you are, look for the reflection in the eyes of who forgives you, not in those of who flatters you. You will not inherit my fortune, but something more valuable. My name. Take care of it. With love, your father. I left the letter on the desk inside a sealed envelope. Then I went out to the garden. The air smelled of damp earth and dry leaves. In the distance, Robert's car waited. Martha approached to say goodbye. Will you come back soon, Mr. William? She asked. I do not know, dear. Sometimes one does not return. One just learns to stay at peace where one is. The road to the country house was long and winding. The trees formed a natural tunnel, and the sound of the wind in the branches brought me a peace I had forgotten. When we arrived, the wooden gate remained the same, old with Sarah's initials and mine carved in the center, W&S. It was our symbol of eternal love. The house, although covered in dust, was intact. Each room held a piece of history. Emily's crib, Sarah's guitar, the letters we used to write to each other in times of youth. Walking through the hallways, I felt memory embrace me without reproach. I lit the fireplace and stayed looking at the fire. I thought about what had happened, how pain had pushed me to trace such a cold plan, and yet that plan had returned her humanity to my daughter. Paradoxical, yes, but life is full of paradoxes that only time clarifies. 3 days passed in silence. Robert called me daily. How do you feel? He asked. At peace, I always replied. Until one morning, Martha informed me that Emily had gone to look for me. She is here at the entrance, she said with a low voice. She looks different. I went out to the porch. There she was, standing with a bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. Her eyes no longer had the shine of vanity, but of someone who had cried too much. Dad? Her voice was barely a whisper. Can I come in? I nodded. We walked inside without speaking. She placed the flowers on the table. They are from Mom's garden, she said. I recognized them. We sat by the fire. For a few minutes we only heard the crackling of the wood, until she broke the silence. I read your letter, and what did you feel? Shame and relief. Relief comes when the soul stops lying to itself, I replied, her eyes filled with tears. Dad, I want to do something with the foundation. Not to redeem myself, but to honor her. I want to work there, not as an heir, but as a volunteer. I want to start from the bottom. I looked at her in silence. It was not the voice of the haughty woman who one day called me a selfish old man. It was that of the girl who one day promised to take care of me. And I felt that Sarah, wherever she was smiling. Then do it, I said. Would you really let me? I have nothing to leave you, daughter, only the opportunity to do it right. She nodded, drying her tears. For the first time in a long time, she did not speak to me of money or guilt. She spoke to me of purpose, and I knew that finally she was waking up. That afternoon, Robert arrived without warning. He brought some documents. "I'm interrupting something important, I know," he said, "but this could not wait." "What is it?" I asked. "The legal formalization of the Sarah Morales Foundation. I want you and Emily to sign together as representatives." Emily looked at him excited. "Me too?" "Yes, daughter," I said. "It is time you earn your place." We signed the papers. When I finished, Robert looked at me with a mix of pride and melancholy. "You know, old friend, not everyone has the courage to forgive without forgetting." "It is not courage," I replied. "It is love that learned to set limits." Weeks passed. The foundation began to work. Emily worked every day supervising scholarships, helping young people who had no resources to study. Sometimes I watched her from afar talking to the students, and I saw in her gestures the reflection of her mother, that silent tenderness that cures without words. Michael, her ex-husband, disappeared from the map. He never looked for her again, and she never mentioned him again, as if by losing him she had recovered something that was worth infinitely more, her dignity. One day, while reviewing the foundation's reports, Emily brought me a box. "This is for you, Dad." "What is it?" "My notebook. The one I told you I was writing." I opened it. On the first page, a title. "The Man Who Taught Me to Lose Without Hating." I began to read. Every word was a portrait of what we had lived, told from her eyes. It was not a story of guilt, but of learning, of a daughter who made a mistake, of a father who knew how to wait. When I finished, I looked up. She was there smiling through tears. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It is the most beautiful inheritance you could have given me." The following months were the calmest of my life. The country house filled with laughter, grateful young people, life. Sometimes in the afternoons, Emily and I walked together among the poplars on the path. She took my arm and spoke to me of her plans for the future. "I want to open a mentorship program," she said, "so the kids not only study, but learn what Mom always said, that a person's value is not in what they have, but in what they give." "Then do it, daughter," I replied, "and do it your way." And every time I saw her smile, I understood that life, even in its cruelty, knows how to close circles with delicacy. One afternoon, while the sun was setting, Robert found me sitting on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked me. "That I do not have much time left, but finally I know what I will leave behind." "And what is that?" "A story that ends well." We both laughed. He took out his pipe. I took my cane, and we stayed looking at the horizon in silence. After so many years of struggle, I understood something simple. There is no justice without compassion, nor redemption without pain. That night before sleeping, I wrote a last note, which I kept next to Sarah's portrait and Emily's letter. If anyone ever finds these words, I want them to know that forgiveness does not erase the past. It illuminates it. Do not seek revenge. Seek understanding. Do not keep grudges. Keep memory. And when life hurts, you remember. Love does not always save, but it always teaches. I turned off the lamp. The fire crackled in the fireplace. Outside, the poplars whispered, as if the wind repeated my thoughts. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I did not feel fear or sadness. Only gratitude, because I had understood that my greatest fortune was not the money, nor the company, nor the signed papers, but having recovered my daughter, having left in the world something more than a story, a teaching, a legacy. And so ends my story. Not with a perfect ending, but with a heart at peace. Because at my 70 years, I learned that children are not always as one dreams them, but the love of a true father never retires. It only transforms into inheritance of the soul. And if you reach this far, I thank you from my heart for accompanying me on this journey. If this story moved you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment what you thought. Tell me from what city you are watching us, and if you ever also learned to forgive when it seemed impossible.